Thank you for tuning in to Shared Hope International's Invading the Darkness, an anti-sex trafficking podcast. We want to acknowledge that the content we discuss can be emotionally challenging and may evoke strong reactions. The stories we share often involve tough subjects related to suffering caused by sex trafficking, which may be difficult for some listeners to hear. Listener discretion is advised.
I started being exploited when I was about 12 years old. I learned that when I ran away and I could find someone to trade sex for a place to stay or things to eat, it was easier to survive than if I would run away without doing that. And so I learned to do that. This was also at like the dawn of social media, right when social media was first starting to even become a thing. Prior to the social media platforms we have now, these were things like MySpace and AOL and these early social media platforms. And so I kind of learned through my own ingenuity and my own survival skills to use these to get my needs met when I would run away. And as I did that when I was about 13, I ended up making contact via social media with a guy who would be my trafficker. So I had intended to reach out to him to get my needs met through kind of the survival sex form of trafficking and exploitation that I was involved in as a young teen and preteen. And I didn't know that he had a history, obviously didn't know that he had a history of trafficking young girls at that time. I, like most youth who are exploited, had all of the same vulnerabilities. So I had been sexually abused from a young age. My mom is a survivor. So I was a product of her own exploitation. That's how I came into being, and so carried kind of all of that. Even though it wasn't something I knew consciously at a really young age, it was something I felt. You could definitely feel it in the way that she was struggling to even connect or parent. And so I had a lot of vulnerabilities. And I look back, and this is a conversation I have a lot with youth when they're trying to understand why they're running, is my actual home situation when I started running away was safe because I was living with my grandma. But my entire home situation was centered around the trauma I had experienced. It was centered around the fact that I needed therapy and I needed special help in school because my trauma was so severe. And it was centered around trying to get this assistance for me. And so I was always the kid who had been neglected and abused and abandoned. And even though I was safe, I was an abused, neglected, abandoned kid. And instead of those things being what happened to me, I took them as actually who I was. And so I think when I look back and try and figure out why was 12-year-old me running away, it was just because I wanted to be something other than abandoned, abused, and neglected. And when I would run away from my home where I wasn't, because my grandma was really trying to get services for me before they ever had good services like this. But all the services did was remind me. She recognized that I had trauma and needed extra care and therapy. And she really did try. We didn't have good services, in the 90s to be able to meet that need, but she did try. And when I would run away, at least in my young, undeveloped brain, I just got to be me. Nobody was asking about, right? Nobody was asking about where I came from because nobody cared, right? Nobody was asking about whether I had been abused or who my mom was or why I wasn't with my family because nobody else had family. And also what they wanted from me, they didn't need to know my background for. So it allowed me to not have to think about all of the trauma that I had experienced prior to that. And so that's why I was running away. I didn't have a safe and healthy way to reinvent myself. And it was hard to I would go to school and I just knew I didn't belong. That message had been so ingrained in my upbringing that I didn't belong in these places and that I was different, whether that was from kids who could tell that something was wrong, because kids can tell and they will bully based on that, or it was just from people trying to provide services in a way that was not trauma informed. And they'll say things like, well, you're different. You need the extra assistance, right? And all of that was like my entire identity. And I just didn't want that to be my identity. And I didn't have another place to be something else other than those things, except for when I would run away. I was able to make friends who were running away. So this was the time where there were a lot of homeless youth, and it was a very open experience to be a homeless youth. There were kids, I'm from Ventura County, and so I would run away and take the $2 Vista bus to Santa Barbara. And along State Street, which is like the nice shopping area of Santa Barbara, there were homeless youth just sitting on benches, sitting in parks. It was an open experience. Everyone knew they were there. And so I would go to Santa Barbara and find them. And that was where I was like, I finally feel like I'm among other people who are like me. I really romanticized that experience. And I would get picked up and I would get brought home, or I would get taken to the behavioral health hospital or whatever it was that they were trying to do to I wasn't in too much trouble then. So they would just kind of drop me back off at my grandma's, and everyone knew that I was involved in prostitution is what it was called then. Everyone knew that. Law enforcement knew that. Everyone knew that. And this was prior to me actually meeting my trafficker. And when I was 13, I met him, and he kind of pointed out to me that what I was doing already was what was referred to as prostitution and the words that he used for prostitution, right? And so he pointed out to me, you're already doing this. You're just not getting paid. Like, you're worth more than a Taco Bell meal. Like, those were the things that he said. So he framed it in a way that I was selling myself short by not being trafficked. That if I were to go with him, I right, would get paid this amount for doing that. And right now, I'm doing this for a Taco Bell meal, for a place to stay. He would take care of me if we did this together. This would be something we'd be doing together. We'd be a family. And he brought me around, and I'm 13 at this point. And he started bringing me around men who were trafficking 18, 19-year-old girls, who were really violent with these girls. And he used it both as a way to glamorize the experience of being trafficked by showing me these beautiful, now I'm in my 30s, I'm young girls, but at the time I was 13, I looked at them as grown women, right? And he glamorized them and showed me the hair that they had and the nails that they had and the bags that they had and all of the things that they had. But then he also used it as a way to instill fear in me. Because while my trafficker at that time didn't have to or didn't choose to physically assault me, he had me watch as these other traffickers would beat these other girls and would tell me aren't you so glad I don't have to do that to you? I'm so glad I don't have to do that to her. I don't have to already framing it as it was my control. I was in control over whether or not he would ever beat me. He actually spent 3 months grooming me before he ever asked me to engage in an actual act of commercial sex with another person. But it was quickly after that it became clear that he was really in control, and that I was there because I had no other choice, and that it wasn't going to be this glamorous thing. But I kept feeling like that was because that was something wrong with me. Even though I was okay, clearly I am going to be beaten and abused, if not by him, then by buyers. Clearly this isn't life-saving experience. He had done such a good job of grooming me, and my previous life experiences before ever meeting him had done such a good job grooming me that I thought the problem was me. And that if I was a better prostitute, which is what we were thinking at the time, this wouldn't happen to me. If I was better at this, or if I had behaved a certain way, it wasn't, oh, I've been duped. That wasn't the mindset. It truly was, I'm not doing this right. And so if I can just find out how to do this right, then I won't get beat anymore. It'll work, or I'll get that glamorous life that he promised me if I can figure out how to do this right. I ended up truly lucky because my charges were eventually dropped for a lack of evidence against me. But I took the fall for his drug charges at one point, and was arrested and was booked and was facing. Gosh, it's so funny to like think back at that time and remember what my mind was like because it was such an immature mind. Like I know so much now that now it seems more scary now looking back at the consequence than it did then because I really didn't know what I was looking at. And I didn't know the conversations to have to find out. I just knew to do what he was telling me to do and not to do anything else. Like, not to say anything else, not to speak to anyone else. And so I didn't advocate for myself and I didn't ask questions. I was lucky in that it was eventually dropped. And it didn't go even to a preliminary hearing. I refused to speak to a public defender because I had been told not to say anything to anybody. So I refused to speak to them. And I really just, at this point in my life, think like this was God's grace because there's a lot of things that I would be able to do now in advocacy that I wouldn't be able to do had those, even in my state of California, these wouldn't have qualified for vacatur. But that didn't stop my trafficking either. It wasn't like, oh, I'm facing this situation and honestly, based on like police error is the only reason that didn't come to fruition. That was the only time that I was caught in the criminal justice system personally as the perpetrator. I work with a lot of youth right now who are minors actively. Almost every single one of my youth has significant charges that are directly related to their trafficking. So my trafficking went on for 14 years. I didn't exit until I was 27, which was a long time. I made attempts to exit. There would be like maybe a year where I would self-exploit as an adult and I didn't have a trafficker. And then I was kind of caught in this cycle of find a trafficker, he would go to jail, or I would be found by a trafficker, he would go to jail, or something would interrupt that experience. And I would end up in like a domestic violence relationship with somebody who had promised to like save me from this life of exploitation. But of course, it was always like a domestic violence situation. And then I would leave that situation and I would go, well, the only way I know how to support myself is to go back to commercial sex. And then when you're in when you're in the pool, you're likely going to find a trafficker. If you're being exploited, they're everywhere. And so I would go back into like a self-exploitation experience. And then I would end up meeting a trafficker through that and be trafficked. And it was over and over and over again over those 9 years after I turned 18 that I continued in that experience. And that was like me constantly trying to see that dream that my original trafficker had sold me come to fruition. If I can just do this right, he told me, like he promised me that if I can just do this right, this is the life I'm going to have. And it was so much easier to think that I was the problem than to think that I've been sold a lie. And then I have to dismantle my entire worldview. But when right after I turned 27, I got to a situation where it was like, okay, I'm ready to, there was a moment of today is the day where either get out or I have to admit to myself that I'm going back today knowing that I've been sold the lie. Like every day before then, there was some kind of ambivalence, being like, well, maybe if I just try it this way, or if I just do this, or I don't say that, it'll have a different outcome. And there was a specific day, and a lot had led up to that moment, and I was being exploited by a trafficker, by a very violent guy who was like tracking my car and like, sending all of the crazy messages to me, knowing where I was when he shouldn't know where I was, and threatening me with quota, and all of the things that we see with a lot of survivors. And he saw something on my phone that I had been communicating with somebody who was off limits for him, like that I was not allowed to communicate with because he controlled all of the people I was allowed to have contact with. And he dropped me off not industrial, agricultural area in Oxnard, which is like all fields, like strawberry fields and lettuce fields and things. And it was middle of the night. I had no shoes. I was in a sports bra and like volleyball shorts, like tiny little shorts, and had no phone. He took my purse. And in that moment, it was like all of the things that had lived in my mind as like, well, I did get the shoes, so maybe it is, like, maybe I am moving towards it. I did get the bag. Like, he is letting me drive this car. Maybe I am, like, making it work. All those things were gone in that moment. And I was just there by myself. It was like, this is what you really have. This is what you really have. And I was lucky enough, I wouldn't have exited if this hadn't happened. I was lucky enough for about 4 years before that to have had a few people, pastors in my community, who had recognized what was happening to me, and they knew of another girl who had gotten out. And they had exposed me to her. And they had like really been investing in me, even though I was still being trafficked and exploited that whole time. And because I knew about that one girl, I knew it was possible. It was one girl, like one girl. And she was the only person I'd ever heard of who I knew had lived a life like mine and had gotten out and actually gotten better. I was trafficked as an adult also through adult film, through porn. And one of the guys that was like a distribution, he owned like the largest porn distribution company, had taken me to church because I owed him money. In like, I think I was 22. He's like, well, if you come to Easter service, you won't owe me money anymore. He had had a fiance who had left him and entered into a program for adult women who'd been trafficked. And she had like her life had completely changed when that happened. And then after she graduated that program, she'd moved in with a family who were pastors, an older couple, and who lived in the community in Kentucky where this home was. The pastors that took her in, their daughter and son-in-law had started a church in my home community. Yeah. And so they looked at this girl as their sister. And they knew her story. They knew all about her story. So when they met me 4 years prior to me ever exiting on a Easter Sunday, they knew. I mean, I was 86 pounds. Like, I'm 100 and almost 40 pounds right now. I don't have 60 pounds to lose. Like, I'm thin now. I was 86 pounds when I was showing up then. Like, I was like, I don't know how I was even functioning and surviving, like, physically. And so they took one look at me and knew exactly. I mean, the way I was showing up, like, I didn't know how to show up to church. Like, my Sunday best was like, was like what most people would not even wear to the club. Like, that was my Sunday best. And that was me thinking I was like, showing up at my best. And so they took one look at me and knew exactly what was going on. And they would invite me to their house after service every Sunday. So when that day came that I was like, when I was there in that agricultural district, I went, okay, I have options. I can go back to him and know what I'm getting myself into. And if I go back, I know I'm not getting out. I think there always had been like a piece before then that went like, well, maybe I can go back to school, like maybe we'll be in love and move on with our lives, maybe whatever. There was a like, no, this is it. Like, if I go back today, this is who I am for the rest of my life, however long or short that may be. Or I can kill myself. Or I can try what that girl did. I was terrified of any kind of helping assistance because everybody that had offered to help before had either, my mom is a criminalized survivor, so my mom spent in prison for things directly related to her exploitation when I was a teenager. Um, things that she was forced to do because of her, because of being exploited and abused. And so, like, I had, everybody who had promised to help had either, taken me away, had taken my mom away, had taken my kids away, had hurt me. So it was really scary to go, like, it's worth finding out if these people are that or different. If we can take a path directly from where they're currently being exploited to where I am now and make it a straight shot, like that's what we're trying to do. And then we just have to, help the kid realize that that's the path they want to be on. And just showing up has often been enough. In the same way that, like, just knowing that that one girl had this different life, I get to do that a lot now. And I expose them to somebody who's lived their life and the life they've been sold. That's the other piece. I didn't get out at 17. I didn't get out at 18. I tried to make this work until I was 27 and did it in every industry they think they'll be able to make it work for. And so I can come in now and say, not only have I been where you've been, I've been where you think you're going. And it didn't work for me. I can tell you what did work for me when you're 15. And so you don't have to find out about it for the first time at 25. And oftentimes, all I'm doing with the kid is showing them that there's somebody who wants to fight for them. Because most of the kids, vast majority of the girls, specifically for me, that I'm working with, are justice involved. Because by the time they reach out to me, they're feeling like probation or the DA or the public defender is feeling like they don't know how to help the kid anymore. They've exhausted kind of some of the more traditional options because they're getting a hold of me, like, personally. This isn't part of what my job is. And so they're getting a hold of me because I'm the survivor leader in a nearby county. And so by the time I'm meeting this kid, I'm not meeting them when they're high risk. I'm not meeting them after the first month of exploitation. I'm meeting them at 16 or 17 when their trafficking usually started around 12. And so I'm meeting them when probation has custody. Every single one of these kids, they all have serious charges. Every single one of it is related. It's been something that they were doing out of protection for themselves or something they were forced to do by a trafficker. Every single one. Maybe not the fight they got in with their sister or some of these smaller crimes that were probation violations, but that initial serious crime that they're on probation for, or that probation has custody of them over, was always related to the trafficking. I couldn't show you that that's the truth for every kid. For the high-need kids that I get asked to work with, that's been the truth for every single one of them. And the other thing is every single one of them has had a mom that was trafficked and a mom that was criminalized. Now we're seeing, like, the generations of how we've handled this be affected. Again, I don't know that that's every single kid out there, but for some reason, the kids that are in my area of Southern California that are coming with that high level of need to where the system is going, like, we don't know how to help this kid other than get a survivor in front of them who can say, I've been there. All of those kids, their parents were survivors. I've been really blessed in who my employers were, that they brought me into every single meeting that I had no business being in and had nothing to offer in that meeting so that I could learn. But the other thing that I'd say about, like, what the criminal justice system can be doing better is it is 2024 right now. I should not have to argue about whether or not an exploited kid needs care. That seems like the baseline. We should be past that. We should be past having to argue about whether or not a 16-year-old was there via choice with the court system. This isn't Joe Schmo on the street. This is juvenile DAs, juvenile probation, juvenile court judges. adult court judges, adult DAs. These are the people who should know the law. If we have safe harbor, if kids cannot be arrested for prostitution, then it should be a no-brainer that this kid was victimized. We have, in almost every single one of these situations, we already know we're not fighting the uphill battle of having to screen them like so many others are to figure out if they've been trafficked. We already know they've been trafficked, and we still can't get them the help that they need because we still have this mindset in so many counties where I'm at that, okay, yes, they were victimized, but they had that machete with them. But they got in that fight. But they had that gun with them. But they did sell those drugs. So their victimization doesn't matter in this instance. And the kid, we have an affirmative defense in California. So you can use the fact that you were trafficked as a defense. But if you're 14 and you don't want all of the boys you're being housed with in juvenile hall who are sitting in the gallery to know that you were on the blade, that you were exploited, you don't want your public defender to use that as an affirmative defense. And so they don't use it. And so then later when I'm coming in and advocating this kid needs to get out of the hall, they need to get out of adult facilities, wherever they're at, because they need the proper care, they're saying, well, why didn't they bring that up in their trial? If they were really trafficked, why didn't they bring that up? Or maybe if she behaves in this traumatic space that we have her in juvenile facilities or adult facilities, maybe if they behave in there, then we'll allow them to get care, is the other narrative I get all the time. When it's like, how do you expect a child to do anything other than protect themselves with the tools that they have in an unsafe environment? Because in California, we're keeping girls who are charged with those more serious crimes in the boys' units because there are not enough girls being charged with these violent crimes to have their own unit for staffing. So they put them not only with the boys, but with the boys who have these serious violent crimes. So these girls are in survival mode constantly. And the only tools they have to survive are fighting, cussing, biting, spitting, not things that are serving them well and things that are appearing on their own records and things as being reactive and violent. And, they're not written down as had a trauma response to a traumatic situation. So then I'm getting, well, if she would just behave in there, if she would just stop getting into fights in there, then we'd let her get help. So mandatory training for everybody. We have incredible organizations in California that have created bench cards for juvenile judges. We have a survivor advisory board in the state of California that does amazing work that works with youth. I would be wanting to require MDTs for every single one of those kids that's been identified. More screening. Right now, our probation is supposed to screen every kid every 6 months. But when I tell them so you need to screen, and if they come up on the screening tool as high risk or likely exploited, you need to refer them to a victim service agency. And they say, well, that would be every single one of our kids. Well, then that's every single one of your kids, not just the girl that you picked up on the blade. It's also the boy who offended. It's also him if he had that. It's also the ones that were mean to you. It's also the ones that cussed you out. It's also the ones that have been here 20 times. It's every single one of those kids, if they score as needing intervention, we offer them intervention, which we're not doing right now. I'm grateful to say that we see boys because that means we're doing some identification of them, actually. It's, of course, a smaller number than of girls. But what I think is interesting is as a county, not all of our girls come through the criminal justice system. The girls I work with are in criminal justice. As a county, they get referrals from schools and counselors and all of this. But as a county, the only boys we see come through the criminal justice system because they are charged more often because the trauma responses are more often more severe and forced into criminality. So we do see boys in our county. We have boys in our county right now, and sometimes the crimes that they've committed are those crimes that as a culture we are ardently against, right? And those things that are very taboo. But because we failed to identify them when they were little, they went on to thinking that this experience was very normal and they offended in the same way. And that's oftentimes where as a county we're seeing these boys. And then now they're living with this thing that they did for the rest of their life because we didn't identify them until after they offended. So they're not only living with their own victimization, but the way that they hurt another person, which has been really, really tough to watch, and lifelong consequences for those specific offenses that will prevent them from living a life that's going to be able to really provide for them, too. I think we need to be reminded that it's not a one and done. It isn't, well, I did that training for those people, so we're done with that county or we're done with that state. People cycle, people forget. People only intake this part of that training. This is an ongoing hammer that we're going to have to continue to beat over and over and over again until every cog in the machine has it at 100%, not at 50%. And it's only then that the systemic change. This isn't something that's going to be able to be the criminalization of survivors alone, not just trafficking, but the criminalization of survivors is not going to end without major systemic change for the way that our systems are currently handling the problem, the criminality, and just the criminalization of youth specifically.
Wow, Alia's story is so powerful and heartbreaking. Watching her share those moments from the abuse she experienced to her journey through exploitation and ultimately finding a way out, it really brings a light to the complexities of what trafficking survivors face.
Absolutely. What stood out to me the most was how early on Alia used survival tactics like turning to the internet to get her needs met. It's something that so many young people still struggle with today. She was 13 when she first met her trafficker online. And with the rise of social media and apps today, it's terrifying how easy it can be for predators to find and manipulate vulnerable youth.
Well, that's a huge point. It really drives home the need for the robust internet safety education. Shared Hope's resources like Internet Safety Toolkit are crucial for equipping parents, educators, and even teens themselves to recognize grooming. Grooming behavior online, it's a real thing. The link is in the description below of today's episode if you choose to want to enjoy that. But Alia's story is just such a vivid reminder of how important it is to have those conversations early before it's too late.
Exactly. Alia's trafficker groomed her for months, even glamorizing the life of being trafficked. It's heartbreaking how he twisted her reality and made her feel like she had no other options. And that's the message, that if she just got it right, things would get better. And it's a trap that we fall into. And it's not just about physical control, it's about psychological manipulation.
Yeah, that psychological manipulation, it really resonates. I know I felt it. It's so common for survivors to blame themselves. Alia thought that if she were just a better prostitute, her trafficker wouldn't hurt her. It wasn't until later that she realized how deeply she had been manipulated. And the truth is, traffickers use these tactics on the vulnerable youth because they know how to exploit their trauma.
Yeah, and let's not forget how crucial it is for survivors to have safe spaces to turn to when they are ready to leave. Alia's escape was made possible by a group of pastors who believed in her and showed her that a life beyond exploitation was possible. That's such a testament to the power of community and mentorship.
Absolutely. Having that one person who believes in you can change everything. We see this in our Just Like Me leaders, survivors like Alia, like Kim and myself, who are now using our voices to help others. Alia said she didn't even think getting out was possible until she saw another survivor who made it. That visibility is so important. It gives others the courage to take that step forward to freedom.
That's right, Yvonne. And it's not just about providing resources, it's about showing up consistently for survivors. This is something that we push through Shared Hopes trainings, providing people with tools to recognize the signs of trafficking, offer support, and advocacy for policy changes. We've made a lot of progress, but the work is far from over. Survivors like Alia show us that we still have so much more to do.
Speaking of that, let's remind our listeners of the tools Shared Hope provides. If you are a parent, educator, or anyone working with young people, we encourage you to check out the Internet Safety Toolkit on our website. The link is in our bio and in the description below. It's designed to help people understand how traffickers operate online and how to create a safer environment for our kids.
That's right. And for anyone working in the juvenile justice or with at risk youth, our annual Just Training Conference is another invaluable resource. It's all about building knowledge around identifying victims and trafficking, offering trauma informed support, and pushing for systematic change. We want to make sure that kids aren't getting lost in the system that don't understand them.
Exactly. Alia's journey wasn't about getting out of exploitation. It was about rebuilding her life and finding her voice. Now she's helping others break that cycle. And that's why we do what we do at Shared Hope. We help create a world where survivors aren't just rescued, but empowered to lead, advocate, and change the world for future generations.
Absolutely. Alia's story is a powerful reminder that the right support and resources, recovery is possible. And while it is not an easy road, it's worth every effort that we put into it. Thanks for listening, everyone. And remember to check out Shared Hope's resources and share this episode to help raise awareness.
Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time on Invading the Darkness, where we continue to share the stories that fuel change and bring hope.
Thank you for listening to Shared Hope International's Invading the Darkness podcast. You can continue to listen and watch our podcast on all streaming platforms. To learn more about what Shared Hope International is doing and take action to end child sex trafficking, please visit us at sharedhope.org.